I graduated early out of high school, went to work full-time, working full-time while going to school. It is good for these kids. And you know what these kids of today are? Majority of them are lazy. They don't know what work ethic is, but they know how to play video games all night. They know how to join gangs. They know how to get into trouble. Get a job and be responsible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1795 deals with youth employment. My bill does three things. First, it removes the provision that a worker's permit is required for improvement or employment of youth 14 and 15 years old and switches that to a parental permission slip. Currently, if your child is between the ages of 14 and 15 and is interested in work, they must obtain a work permit from the state, and then the school district must sign off. This bill moves that responsibility instead to a parent, legal custodian, guardian, or designated guardian. The employer would be required to have a signed parental permission slip for their youth that is 14 or 15 years old and work at their business. The second item it does is it says that the federal government changes the allowed hours for work, that the state of Missouri will follow that. I do not believe that the school district needs to determine if my child is responsible enough to have a job. That is the right and the responsibility of the parent involved with that child.
I wasn't aware that schools did need to sign off on that.
Absolutely. Since 1957, that has been the law.
And what's the age range there?
It is just for 14 and 15-year-olds, and is only during the point when the kids are in school. It does not include the summer.
That seems like kind of a young age to be earning, to be having a job, to me. Is there a reason why the school should not be a part of that?
Again, I didn't say they shouldn't be a part of it. I just don't think it should be required that the school district has to sign off on this in order for that child to get employment. It should be the parent that makes that ultimate decision and not the school district.
Okay, and what's the other piece to the legislation?
The second piece is on the hours. Currently, federal law dictates that they have to be off by 7 p.m. The reason that this was brought to me was from a restaurant in my town that would like them to be able to work till 8 or 9 p.m. So we were going to make that change. When the Department of Labor for Missouri came and talked about this, they said it's already under federal statute. We can't make that change. So we made the wording in this that says if the federal law changes, that the state of Missouri will mirror that.
So this wouldn't take effect. This piece would not take effect unless the federal law were to also change to that, so we would not be out of compliance with federal law.
You are correct.
Two things, if I can.
Sure, please.
The first is, isn't it fascinating that the restaurant owner asked for this because he wants kids to work later?
I'm a little troubled by that, yes.
It doesn't seem like the kid is first in this thoughtful process versus the restaurant owner.
I think we see that pretty frequently in legislation around when it comes to child labor. For instance, the school calendar.
Right.
That argument was that our tourism industry needed
state fair.
They need workers.
Oh, that too. Yes.
They need the high schoolers to work, and if the high schoolers are in school, they won't be able to work. And one of the reasons they need the high schoolers to work is because they can pay them less.
Right. Something we don't talk about on this floor very often is child abuse and the abuse of children in so many different ways. One of the ways I know children can be abused is when they're homeschooled. And
gentlemen, state your point of order.
I believe this bill is on child employment, not homeschool or abuse.
I'm not an expert or anything, but pretty sure that there's a direct correlation between child labor and child abuse since, I don't know, ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill about parental rights. I'm involved with this issue intimately because my children began to work in Branson, Missouri at age 5. Each one of them began working in a show. They were on stage. They learned about acting. They learned about relating with other people. They began to work at age 5, and to date, all of them in their or near 30s, they each work 2 or 3 different jobs. They're very successful. They have a strong work ethic because they began to work. It was their choice and our choice as parents that they do so at a young age. Our town of Branson, Missouri has 13,000 or so residents, and yet we serve over 10 million visitors per year. We need all hands on deck. If a 14-year-old wants to dip ice cream and put it in a cup, we need them to do that. If they want to bus tables, we need them to do that. All hands on deck. It's a parental choice issue, and it's dealing with the children. They can make those decisions. If they want to work at the track and line up the go-karts, let them do so, because at 63, I don't want to do it. If they want to make some money, go ahead. Thank you. I support the bill 100%. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So the arguments that have been made by the gentleman from Taney and others regarding the need for employment slots to be filled is well taken. But I would say that there's a bigger issue at stake than even just simply filling slots with people who are willing to work. This is, as has already been stated, a matter of parental, not only authority, but parental responsibility. Parents have the responsibility of raising their children to be well-rounded citizens, to operate with a well-developed work ethic when they arrive into adulthood. It is important for children to have opportunity to take responsibility and to apply their hand to the plow, if you will, and to be a part of industry, to be industrious, to work and to labor. There is dignity in all labor that is both ethical and legal, of course. When we have young men and young women that are getting involved in employment at early ages, it is good for them. It's as important for them to be a part of that as it is for them to get a well-rounded education. It takes both work ethic and knowledge and wisdom to be able to be a productive citizen, to be able to take care of, provide for, and protect your family when you arrive into adulthood. I remember when I was a young man, I ended up, I was working in different ways beforehand, but I had my first real paying job when I turned 12. And every day after school, I would roll papers and I would throw a paper route, and I ran that route Monday through Friday after school until I turned 16. And then I got a job at the grocery store as a sacker. And I sacked groceries, and I took those groceries to cars, and I learned what it was. Even prior to that, I learned what it was to be someone who has a well-developed work ethic, which means you learn how to handle frustration. You know how to learn, you learn how to handle people. You know how to do the jobs that no one else wants to do, but you get to do it because, well, it's your job to have to do it. To manage your own impulses, to work and to lean into those moments when you are tired and you don't have interest, but you do it nonetheless because that's what you owe your employer, because your employer is paying your check, right? These are life lessons that are extremely important. This is good for children. It's good for families. It's good for local communities. It's good for our state when we have future generations growing up and learning the value of hard work. This has happened for generations upon generations upon generations. Children have worked beside their parents in the fields in order to help take care of and provide for their families.
As we brought this bill up today, my thoughts went back to my time when I would pass 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds heading to the fields to work. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ecuador, and I would be headed to school. I'd see the kids put on their work gear and ask them if they could join us that day at school. They would say no, because I got to get to the fields. We fought for this in this country so that kids could go to school and not be forced to work. Looking back at our history of child labor in this country, it was in 1842 when finally in the state of Massachusetts, they were able to limit the workday for children under the age of 12 to 10 hours. For decades and decades, people fought so that kids could be safe, get an education at the time when it's more important than ever. And instead, today we see a rollback of child labor laws in red state after red state, and I thank God that we only have a few days left of session, that we're not going to see the child labor laws rolled back in this state. Here's the situation, folks. This all came about during COVID, when we were faced with labor shortages, and the business industry said, I don't care about the hazardous working conditions, let's roll back these child labor laws and get kids to work. Let me share a story about a kid that died in our state. In June of 2022, William Hampton was killed in Lee Summit. He was killed while working at a recycling park when he was pinned between a semi-truck and a trailer. Take a look. We have a lot of extra time on our hands these days. Do some research about kids who are dying across our country because red states are rolling back child labor laws, putting kids, quite frankly, in harm's way. So today we're talking about 14 and 15-year-olds. What's next? How young is it? How young is too young to work? Well, I got a 10-year-old, and yes, he loves to raise chickens right now. So is it time to send him out on the poultry farm full time? Yeah. What are we doing? This is one of the maddening things that we do in this place, is say that we care about kids. Look what happens when kids are spending more time working than in school. If we care about kids, we're going to keep protecting them. Kids have died, kids have been maimed because they're placed in hazardous working conditions. I know there's a lot of chatter, a lot of jokes going on the floor right now, but rarely have I seen from page 4 to page 8, just strick it out, statutes that have been put in place to keep kids safe because, hey, we need to get them to work. This is sickening. Vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to speak on the bill.
Proceed, lady.
This is a good bill, and everyone should vote yes for this. But I'm just going to kind of expand here. You know, it seems like the division is great in this room. One side of the aisle versus the other is so obvious. You know, at what point are people going to be self-responsible? Some people seem to think the government is the answer for everything. You know, free food, free health care, free this, free that, free. But it's not free. These young kids need to be taught self-responsibility. And I can tell you my personal story. I started working at age 9. And I continued to work throughout high school when I was 14, 15. And my parents, I wanted to get a driver's license. And they're like, sorry, Cherie, we can't afford to add you to our car insurance, much less a car. And I went to work in Columbia at 15, but my older brother was 17, so we worked the same location. He drove. He was able to buy his own car and pay his own insurance. And my parents were fully supportive, and it didn't affect any grades whatsoever. My parents always asked me, Sheree, how do you get A+? Well, Mom and Dad, you get 100% on your homework, and you do extra credit. And throughout high school, when I was working 12 months out of the year, my high school counselor came to me and said, Sheree, you're bored. You got enough credits. Graduate early. I graduated early out of high school, went to work full-time, working full-time while going to school. It is good for these kids. And you know what these kids of today are? Majority of them are lazy. They don't know what work ethic is, but they know how to play video games all night. They know how to join gangs. They know how to get into trouble. Get a job and be responsible. Vote yes.
Mr. Clerk, please close the board and tally the vote. By your vote of 104 yes, 38 no, you have passed moved the previous question. Gentlemen from St. Charles County, you have 1 minute to close.